going off of last week, we talked a lot about Marvel and the MCU and Thunderbolts. It was a really great week having that conversation. And there was some news this last week that Jake Schreier, the director of Thunderbolts, might be tapped to do the new X-Men movie for the MCU. And how do you feel about that, Brendan?
Nah.
Okay.
And let me say it this way. I guess there's a longer answer, obviously. I don't think Jake Schreier is a bad choice for X-Men, at least given what we saw with Thunderbolts. I think he can craft a fairly efficient X-Men movie based on his experience that we've seen thus far. I just wish and I hope that if Marvel's going to start acknowledging the mistakes that they've made over the last few years with phases 4 and 5, they have to stop giving new things to the last immediate success that they had. And that's the thing that worries me, just more so the immediacy of this potential announcement. Because we've seen Marvel do this a lot. They had a hit with Spider-Man Homecoming, for instance. Okay, so let's give everything to John Watts going forward. He's now going to do Fantastic Four. Well, that didn't happen. And these kind of things tend to happen. They announce things too quickly based on whatever immediate success that they had and just had, that they don't do the thinking yet. So I just don't want them to jump the gun. That's the thing that scares me and why I'm a little bit unsure about this news. It's not so much the Jake Schreier announcement. It's more so the Marvel announcement specifically and how they're choosing to go about this. I'd rather see them take their time, focus a bit on what they need to do before they really jump the gun on what their last immediate success was and really take their time with it.
The only thing that gives me hope about this, and I guess there's two things. I love Thunderbolts, obviously.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good.
If you listen to our review last week, I opened my thoughts on that film by stating pretty aggressively, you could argue, that it was in my top 10 of the entire MCU. Forget phase 4 and 5, which it's very much in the argument to be the best since Endgame. But of all of the MCU, I think it's a top 10 Marvel film.
It's really good, man. It's really good.
It's awesome. So that gives me hope.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is that what they're tasking him to do isn't a sequel to Thunderbolts. It's something else entirely. And the reason that gives me hope is that when they have asked directors to come back, typically they are for sequels. And sequels in the MCU with the same filmmakers have had lesser returns most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. When you think about the Thor films, for example, those got worse and worse. In Black Panther Wakanda Forever, as much as I do really like the film, I do think it is great. I don't think it's nearly as good as Black Panther.
Yeah.
Maybe that is debatable for some, but I would argue there are lesser returns there. And I think part of the convolution of Wakanda Forever is because there's much more Marvel that Coogler had to deal with versus Black Panther. It could be more of a Coogler film than an MCU film until you get to the third act, obviously.
Yeah.
Where that balancing act was much more of a struggle in Wakanda Forever. Now, there are external circumstances.
There were very tragic circumstances there for sure.
And I understand that. A lot of grace and patience, which is ultimately, again, why I do really like Wakanda Forever. Don't get me wrong. But
it has some very high highs. It's a very inconsistent movie.
I agree.
Yeah.
But when you accumulate all of that together, I do think there are diminishing returns there. So generally, I think bringing back the same director to do a sequel to their previous film, and John Watts is another example. We debated, talked about how Far From Home was quite.
That was like very much.
I will still kind of defend it, but it is a messier film than its predecessor.
It
No Way
definitely
Home.
has
He
the
does come back with No Way Home, though. That is
yeah.
probably the biggest
I,
outlier
I
to my argument here.
Yeah, I think Far From Home, that middle film of the Spider-Man quote unquote trilogy there, definitely feels the most corporately mandated when compared to Homecoming. No Way Home, there definitely seems to be more of a compromise between what John Watts is trying to bring to that film and how he's trying to work alongside Marvel and even Sony with bringing all that stuff together.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more of a smoothness there, even if I may argue that Homecoming's the closest to maybe his directorial vision. But No Way Home is a very efficient coming together of all of those different things. So I think
Yeah.
that's maybe an example of maybe it kind of working in that director's favor. So I think that's a fair point there.
Yeah. Ant-Man films are another great example of what I'm talking about as well. Diminishing
Oh my
returns as
gosh.
those went
Quantumania was
along.
not directed by Peyton Reed.
Absolutely. The Russo brothers might be another outlier here, but they're working with the Avengers movies. So
They're working with a
maybe
system there.
like it feels like that's a separate thing altogether.
Yeah.
And the Russos are clearly working closely with Feige in that case. And obviously he doesn't have his hands as deeply into all of these other films as
Yeah.
he's going to with the Avengers. So I don't know how much those films count per se. But
I would agree.
generally speaking, if the news was Jake Schreier's coming back to do Thunderbolts 2, then
That'd be worse. That'd be worse. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that'd be worse.
Him coming back to do a different project altogether, I'm not opposed to that, especially since Thunderbolts was great. So if he teams up with another pair of writers that can deliver great material, and obviously the X-Men is rich with great material in the comics.
Sure.
So depending on how they decide to utilize that, now we're decades deep into the MCU. So they can't start from scratch. I guess we'll see how Doomsday gives them a launching pad.
Sure.
Doomsday and Secret Wars.
Yeah.
How does that give them a launching pad to do their X-Men movie? We'll see where that goes. Maybe there will be more of a starting from scratch than I'm giving it credit for now. I don't know. It's hard to say because we haven't seen Doomsday and Secret Wars yet. We don't know how they're coming into the MCU.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of rich material to choose from in the comics. Really, I think the biggest hurdle that they have to climb over is there's been 2 decades of X-Men movies. You have to differentiate yourself from those movies with a new cast, I would assume, a new cast of X-Men characters.
Especially when they're bringing back most of the old cast for Doomsday.
Which, again, like my theory there is, and they've more or less confirmed, right? So the X-Men coming, like the OG characters coming in are from another universe, quote unquote, coming from another universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever happens with Secret Wars and Doomsday, the 616 X-Men, I'm going to assume is going to bring us a new cast. That's what makes sense to me.
I would expect, maybe even kind of hope so. Because I want to see a new iteration of it, especially given how much time we've spent with this old universe, and especially since Disney, Marvel / I guess now technically Fox in a way, given what we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine, they're closing the loop on that old world of X-Men. That's the whole point of all of this, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to give them closure, and then you'll be able to bring in the new 616 iteration of these characters, and I assume that means a new cast to take the mantle for those characters. Unless you're bringing back the Fassbender crew. And that's the 616 iteration.
Oh, gosh. That's messy.
Maybe. But I could see Disney pulling the trigger there because we already know those characters. We know the actors very well, and we love those actors as those characters already.
Is that going to be Marvel's way of explaining how there was such a lack of continuity with the X-Men Fox movies by saying that these were actually different universes the whole time?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Again, that is a stretch. That is a stretch. I'm not
Yeah,
expecting
yeah,
that at all. I
yeah,
think
I'm not
we are
sure.
going to get a new cast altogether
Hmm.
for the 616 X-Men. And that gives Schreier and his writing team a blank slate for the most part. For the most
Yeah,
part.
yeah,
And we've already seen Schreier work within those confines, within the MCU confines, while also doing his own thing
yeah,
with Thunderbolts, obviously.
yeah.
And that is a team up movie. So, I mean, all the puzzle pieces are there for Schreier to make a really good X-Men movie. And I'm more excited for that than if they said he's coming back for Thunderbolts too.
Oh, I would be less excited for a Thunderbolt sequel, and he was coming back for that.
Yeah,
But at the same time, like I said, really the thing that puts me or makes me a little apprehensive about this news with Drake Schreier coming in to do X-Men. Like I said, it's really more to do with the immediacy of this announcement because I feel
yeah,
like it's once again a reflection of Marvel's bad habits. And I thought they were trying to get away from this. Like, okay, we just had a big success with this movie. Okay, this director's doing more stuff now. So, and they've done this many times, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. And I don't necessarily mind the idea of Drake Schreier coming back to do X-Men. I think his sensibilities would work for that. Like I said, I if Marvel's at a place where they want to start reconfiguring their agenda and their slate and how they're going to go about this, I think they need to pause when they make these decisions.
yeah.
I don't think it can be rapid fire. And I think once again, it seems to reflect kind of this battle between how Feige wants to do things and then how Bob Iger is very immediately doing things because those producers are very
Yeah.
attracted to short-term success.
Well, and here's the other caveat to what you're talking about because Bob Iger, you almost have to laugh when he says this, but he did come out last week to reiterate that they have shifted priorities and they are now focusing on quality over quantity. Those are his words. Again, yeah, I agree. You have
He
to
is
laugh.
he is gaslighting us so bad. He is
He is gaslighting everybody.
someone made the great comparison that said what he is doing is essentially what Valentina does at the end of Thunderbolts. it's,
Pretty much.
it's the
Yeah.
exact same thing, and
Yeah.
I fully buy into that theory. I do.
I mean, I totally get it as well. However, if I'm going to take him at his word, look at the face value of it, and they really believe that Jake Schreier can deliver on that quality, for
Hmm.
me, this comes down to can they keep their hands out of the cookie jar and
Hmm.
let Jake Schreier cook, as the kids say. If they let him make his movie, again, understandably, there's always going to be parameters
Yeah.
to the MCU, as
Hmm.
they had with Thunderbolts. But if Bob Iger can stay away, let Kevin Feige do his thing, let Jake Schreier do his thing, and keep the corporate interest away from that, and let them actually focus on quality, then okay, I
Hmm.
can buy those comments. But we have to see it to believe it. Your word at this point means nothing.
And that's
Okay, Bob?
that is why this news gives me pause because there's nothing as of yet to put their money where their mouths are, like to justify this new way of thinking. This
Yeah.
immediate, this immediate action of bringing Drake Schreier back in any form feels more mirroring of their previous bad habits that they claim to want to get away from. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong. This could be something that they're just simply announcing now, but for all we know, Drake Schreier will be working on his X-Men movie in the next 6 or 7 years and has time to work on it. And Bob Iger and the producers at Disney, the check cutters, if you will stay away. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. And that's what I hope to
Mhm.
see. And if Bob Iger
Yeah.
is honest with those words, then maybe we will see that because I think he's also saying, I don't know if it was him, maybe it was Kevin Feige. They're also saying that what we see going forward on Disney Plus will mostly only feature characters not in the movies going forward, which I think is not necessarily a bad call in order to try and keep that world a little bit separated from the cinematic world so there's less quote unquote homework to be doing. I don't necessarily mind that. So it seems as though, given these announcements, that they are retooling. I just hope they're not jumping the gun and going back to old habits with this. And that's the thing that gives me pause.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Bob's got to prove it now with his actions.
Yeah.
I mean, what he's saying is great.
I agree. It's the right
I
thing.
want to believe him, but I don't because his actions prior to all of this have proven that all he wants to do is make a mess of things.
Let's
we'll
see how the rest of Phase 6 plays out.
But they have
yeah.
time. They have
Yeah.
time because Phase 6 right now, unless they decide to pivot, is Fantastic Four, Doomsday, Spider-Man Brand New Day, and Secret Wars. I did hear a rumor that there is going to be another film in between Doomsday and Secret Wars, aside from Spider-Man. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think that's official at this point. However, if Phase 6 stays as it is, that means that this new X-Men film will not come until 2027 after Secret Wars. So one would assume toward the end of that year, most likely you're looking at 2028. So you do have 3 years to work on this and get it right.
Unless that's the secret film Jake Schreier is already working on.
Which that would not surprise me. That would not surprise me if that is the mystery film to come out in between Doomsday and Secret Wars. And it would make sense given
It kind of would. It kind of would actually, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah.
I mean, the timeline matches up there, and we know those characters are going to be heavily involved in those Avengers movies. So
I feel like if this secret film that hasn't been announced yet, if it even exists, if it is going to happen, it's most likely some type of X-Men movie. Maybe it'll be a third Doctor Strange movie, but I can't imagine it really being anything else because I feel like everything else they could do, they could theoretically wrap up somewhere within Doomsday or Secret Wars. I feel like it's, I don't know, if they do have some secret film that they haven't announced yet that's being worked on behind enemy lines, if you will, kudos on them for keeping that at bay. I will give them credit for that.
Yeah. So we shall see. Secret Wars, as of now, if I'm not mistaken, is slated for May 7th, 2027. So either that is an early 2027 film, a la to Brave New World this year, or I guess it could be a late October, November release of 2026. We'll see. We'll see. I'm curious where they slot it in, theatrically speaking.
Yeah.
To make all of this work.
Yep, absolutely.
We'll find out soon enough.